Okay, we mentioned earlier that we call mummy mummy because we're Jamaican, and I think it's important to know that that really is kind of at the core of who we are. I was born in Jamaica. My mother was actually pregnant with me when she moved down. Our parents are Jamaican, and then Judy came not even 2 years later.
Being Jamaican is truly at the core of who we are. It sets the stage for all of our family values, our traditions, our celebrations, the food we eat, the music we listen to. I feel that I bleed my colors, which are green, black, and yellow, and I'm just so very proud of the island that we come from. We have images in our homes that are all about Jamaica, and it's just something that's very important to us, and we like to share with others. So join us as we look back at our time in Jamaica and what that was like for us. We grew up in a neighborhood called Discovery Bay, and the beach that was located there in Discovery Bay is Puerto Seco, and it's still my favorite beach of all time. And I remember swimming in the sea, holding on to my mother's legs as she swam, and I just held on, and just spending the time at Puerto Seco Beach. Thinking about it now, it really brings back a lot of memories and almost gets me emotional to think about it because it was such a significant part of our childhood.
I learned how to swim at Puerto Seco, and I remember being there with mommy and you, and then daddy coming down from the clinic and swimming in the beach. Daddy he was so cautious. He would swim parallel to the shore. He never went where further than his chest. He would always swim parallel to the shore. So he was really cautious. Another beach memory I have is when we would go to Duncan's, and there's nothing like being in the ocean water and then it starts to rain because the rain is cold and the water's warm and it feels really cool. And just when you're enjoying that feeling, your mother said, get out of the water right now. Mind you get struck with lightning. And so it never lasted long because we were afraid of being electrocuted.
Yeah, I remember those Jamaican storms. Like the rain was like passionate, the way it would just descend down upon the island. And when you're caught in it, there's very little you can do, but you enjoy it. Like you said, being at the beach with the rain, walking around, it's or just sitting and just watching it come down. It's just a beautiful sight to see.
Speaking of electrocution, I know,
Where's
what
this
a
going?
segue. I also recall one time being at the house and it started to rain, and there was a tree out front, and I was little, maybe about 4 or 5. And as it started to rain, I hid under the tree, like to get coverage, and then lightning struck right next to me. And I remember that strange feeling going through my body and then running into the house terrified. I mean, I distinctly remember just being barefoot and playing in the front yard. And how many times did I step in dog poop barefoot? You can never forget that feeling where it like squeezes up and you look down and it's coming in between your toes. And we had so many dogs. I think every Jamaican child has experienced that.
Yes, absolutely. I remember the dogs. Our father was a physician and he also thought himself of a bit of a veterinarian. So he would actually take care of the dogs in our home. So we had a lot of them.
Dobermans.
Yes. And there was one instance where the dogs were fighting, and I, maybe 3 years old, was in the middle of the fight. And it was my older brother that had to come and like rescue me from the brawl that was ensuing in our yard.
Yes, and I actually have a scar on my left hand from when I actually put my little hand in a dog's mouth and they bit down, and then daddy sutured me up, probably in the living room. Speaking of living rooms, our father was a doctor, and because we were the only game in town, we would have people just come to the house sick. Lots of times it was tourists, And then Daddy would change the living room into an exam room. And then the four of us would be peeping through the windows and around the corners trying to see what Daddy was doing. I remember a tourist come and she was bitten by a scorpion. Then I remember when that kid came because his penis was stuck in a zipper, a scene of Something About Mary. And then this isn't so funny, but I remember one time when a bereaved mother brought her dead baby to the house in a shoebox, asking Daddy to do something. Life in Jamaica was very real. There was no such thing as sheltering kids or they're too young, or it was very real and very raw.
Yes.
I think it's important that we talk about where our parents come from. Even though my father was a physician, and that was a big deal in his family, he came from a very rural area of Jamaica. It was in the parish of St. Catherine, and to get to his house, you have to walk through a beaten path. You pull up on the side of the road, and it just looks like a path, and it's called Crab Hole. And you walk probably maybe half a mile inland, and then you see a little house, and then that's the house where Daddy grew up. And then behind the house, there's like a nutmeg tree, coconut trees, but then there's also the grave sites of our ancestors. And that holds a very significant place in my heart because I know where I come from.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I remember as a child going up country, that's what we call it when we go to visit our first homes. So going up country as a child and being excited about experiencing that. Using the outhouse with a banana leaf, that was just thrilling to us. Being with our great aunts as they were cooking in the kitchen, which is not really a kitchen, it's like a smokehouse. And the kitchen area would be so filled with smoke and your eyes would be burning you. And yet my old great grand aunt would be able to cook and prepare the meal without it ever bothering her. Just so many fond memories of going up country. But what I want to share also is that these are not just our memories between my sister and myself. We share these with our brothers. We share these with our family. But what's really important is that we share them with our children. Our children have been to Jamaica a number of times, and each and every trip we go up country. Why? Because it's important for them to know where they come from. It's important for them to see the humble beginnings and to recognize what their ancestors did in order for them to be where they are today. So we love those trips up country with our kids.
Right. And then let's talk about Mummy. Mummy comes from a place in Jamaica, in St. Mary. Her grandmother's maiden name was Fraser, and there were so many of them that the area that she came from was called Fraserwood. My grandmother and my great-grandmother, uncles, cousins, they're all buried in a place called Quarry. And I love that I know my heritage. Let's talk about some food situations.
Oh, some food. Wow.
Goat,
curry goat, patties, and we'll explain some of these things for you. But the coca bread, the curry chicken, the jerk chicken, the hardo bread. Oh my gosh. So hardo bread is a loaf of bread, but it's very different from the bread that you get here in the United States. It's very dense. It's very thick, hard dough. My parents would go maybe on a Sunday to the bakery, throw the loaf in the back, and the four of us would, with our fingers and hands, just dig into the core of the hardo bread and eat the bread before we even got home.
You know what? I think we need to backtrack and talk about goat. Because I remember at our godbrother David Rose's christening, I was playing with the goat maybe at noon, and by 4 or 5, I was eating the goat. Every Jamaican boy has a story of being given a goat as a pet to take care of and then end up eating the goat at some point. It happened to Daddy, and I'm sure it happens to thousands of boys in Jamaica. Also, do you remember when we had the chicken and we had to sacrifice the chicken? Do you remember that?
Of course, I see it happening right now.
Okay, so tell them what happened.
So I had mentioned my grand aunt cooking in the smokehouse, and her name is Mama. That's what we referred to her as. We were there visiting, and she was to prepare dinner. So we got a chicken. I can't remember of the person who
cut the head off?
Yeah.
Well, what happened is we put the chicken underneath like a zinc wash basin. So the head is poking out.
Yes.
The body is under the basin. Judy was sitting on top of the basin. And then, of course, the machete comes down, cuts off the chicken's head. And then in the excitement, Judy jumps up. The chicken goes running down the hill. Like literally
Yes.
chicken with a head cut off.
Yes.
And then, of course, you have to retrieve the chicken, so you follow the blood trail. Okay, to all the PETA listeners, I'm sorry, but this really happened. So that was just part of the excitement of being in Jamaica. And that's what I was mentioning earlier, that things are raw. Things are just real. You don't keep things from kids. It's just a cool memory to have.
Oh, absolutely. I remember like the screaming and the laughter as you're chasing the chicken down the hill.
Exactly. So I mentioned that we migrated from Jamaica. That was 1973. Our brothers were born here. They were U.S. citizens. But since we were Jamaican citizens, we couldn't come directly to the United States. We had to go to Canada and process our immigration papers there. And we were there for about 6 weeks. We stayed with our aunt, uncle, and cousin. And then we were able to move to California. At that point, Daddy had come before us, and Daddy had purchased a house. Mm-hmm. And then when Daddy picked us up at the airport, remember it was 1973, Daddy was wearing some platform shoes, and it was like a different man. His hair was longer, and he was like in a big lapel shirt. But I thought he was the coolest person because he could navigate the freeways. By the way, if you hear some laughter in the background, that's our mother. That's Mommy, because I guess she's remembering her husband in platform shoes, dressed like Superfly.
Oh my gosh, this is so funny. I'm seeing this as we're talking about it.
So we moved to Beverly Hills, and we were at Horace Mann, and then soon after we were enrolled, we ended up in the newspaper, the Beverly Hills Courier.
Absolutely. I have that picture. I have that clipping from the newspaper on my desk right now. So my father took us to enroll us in school, and we were a bit of an anomaly. You know, Jamaican family moves to Beverly Hills. And when he was enrolling us, they asked us if we would come back to have our picture taken for the newspaper. So I think we had to go home, change our clothes, not really sure what's happening or why this is such a big deal, but we were definitely featured in the Beverly Hills Post.
Right. And I actually thought it was because my father was like a cool guy. But it wasn't until later that I realized that Beverly Hills wanted to advertise that they had Black people. And we weren't celebrities. We were just a family of 6 migrating from Jamaica.
Right, right. It's funny to think about. That was my first, brush with celebrity.
Right,
being in the newspaper at 5 years old.
I remember I had difficulty moving here just because I remember people telling me that I talk funny and asking questions like, if I live in trees, do I swing around like Tarzan? And then when I bring my lunch, people criticize how it looks, how it smells. And I really did feel like an outcast. I remember friends kind of fighting to sit with me on the school bus in Jamaica and then coming here and not feeling like I belonged. What do you remember?
I did just start kindergarten, so I don't think it was as challenging for me as it was for my sister and my brothers. But I do remember people asking me about my accent and why I spoke funny. And to me, it wasn't funny. This is just the way I spoke. Talking about being in the jungle. Do I wear a loincloth? Do I take off my school clothes when I get home and put back the loincloth on? And it just seemed so, in my 5-year-old brain, just so ridiculous. I didn't realize what it was, but as I grew, I came to understand where those questions were coming from and what that was about. But anyway, as I got acclimated into school and had my own circle of friends, my friends coming to my home, and my parents would be speaking, and they would turn and say, "What language are your parents speaking? I didn't understand a word of that." And it seemed so foreign to me because my parents were speaking English, but they could not understand my parents' English.
But I will have to say, whenever Daddy got really excited or happy, his accent would be really thick and he'd be laughing, and friends would look at me and they would just laugh because they'd say, "I have no idea what he just said. What did he just say?" But
well, I can say that I know to this day when I get escalated, that accent comes out.
oh God, yes.
That
yes.
accent comes out.
Yes.
And then let's not get started on you and I trying to imitate our mother.
Oh yeah, yeah. And you know what? With the kids, whenever I get angry at them, the accent does come out. And then when they were small, they would say, "Mommy, why are you talking Jamaican?" Yeah, you revert to kind of what you know when you become emotional.
Yeah. Actually, my children love when I slip into my Jamaican accent. They particularly love when I imitate their grandmother. Let's just be clear. Our children adore our mother. She is the matriarch. She is the pillar. She is the glue. We couldn't do any of this without her. So I just needed to give her a little plug. She deserves it.
Yeah, that certainly is true. So despite those early immigrant challenges, we eventually acclimated, moved on, made lifelong friends, all while maintaining our Jamaican roots. I know I'm not the only one who has friends who love coming to the house for Mummy's food.
Oh my gosh. I'm thinking of one person in particular. Shout out to you, Josh Beckman, who would know when my mother was cooking and come and sneak food as she is preparing it. Let's not talk about the track team and how they would show up, descend upon my mother's kitchen for whatever Jamaican deliciousness she was preparing on any given evening.
And Mommy always cooked a bunch of food whenever it was track season.
She did, because she fed the team. So I want to point out something. We've talked a little bit about our mother. We've mentioned our father. But what we haven't mentioned yet is that our father is no longer with us. It's been over 3 decades since we lost him. And it's hard for me to even talk about that today because it's still so fresh. He was such a powerful force in our family. It still hurts that we lost him, but I'm going to tell you something. The memories that we have of our father are so strong and so vivid that we share these stories with our children. And these 8 grandchildren know him like he was here today. They can recall memories based upon stories that we've shared about something that Grandpa didn't do, how he laughed, how he cried when he laughed. And we've really been able to keep that memory and legacy.
It's not just a memory, it's a legacy, because whenever my children excel at something, they would say, "You think Grandpa would be proud?" Or when Yaya, who's my youngest, she did well at Latin, she recalled, "Well, I think I got it from Grandpa because Daddy taught himself Latin." How many Jamaican boys do you know who teach themselves Latin?
Right. Yeah. He was a bit of an overachiever.
Yeah.
I'm really proud of the job that we've done in instilling his memory, his legacy into our children. So we know that they're out there talking about their grandfather to their friends, to the people that they encounter, as if they've met him, and yet they never had the pleasure of, hearing him say, "Who you want amongst?"
Yes, yeah.
Which means, come and give your grandfather a hug.
Yeah, yeah. So we are going to be next week talking about our career paths and the type of work that we do. I am a board certified child abuse pediatrician and board certified pediatrician, and now I'm a podcaster. And then Judy?
Yes, so I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I came to my career a little bit later in the game, but when you find your calling, it doesn't matter what age you are, you just go for it because you know it's the right thing to do. I also have the great pleasure of teaching at a local university, and I have a small private practice, but I love the work we do, and I think that's why one of the reasons why we're here, Candy, because we want to share this work that we do with this audience and really bring back a lot of these issues to, again, the medical and to the mental health field and how those things are all connected.
Yes, and Judy forgot to mention she's the director of diversity, equity, and inclusion of a nonprofit community mental health center.
Oh, yeah, I did forget that. Thank you for sharing that. I am very passionate about creating equity for all and building a community of inclusivity. Truly, we are all welcome at this table. You're hearing our voices, but you know what? We're going to want to hear from your voices because here at our table, all voices matter.
And no matter what the conversation is, we can relate. Before we go, we'd like to leave you with a recommendation for our go-to Jamaican cookbook. Besides our mother, who she's horrible at getting recipes from because she said, you just put a little bit of this and then you pour it till it look this way, and then when the grease start winking, that's when you know you're ready. Anyway, since Mommy isn't available to all of you, we'd like to recommend The Real Taste of Jamaica, which is a book by Enid Donaldson. And I believe it might be out of print. I bought one for a friend, I think on eBay. But this has a really good kind of primer to many Jamaican recipes, and it's easy to follow.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So please like, comment, share, send us a question, and we are dying to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. Tusoka out.
The original music for this podcast was made by our uncle, Keith Jacks. Thank you, Uncle Keith.
Please feel free to reach out to us at tusokapodcast@gmail.com.
No Longer Network.